All right, welcome everyone to our today's work session. We'll jump right into it. The first item of business is report on debt obligation. That's agenda item number 24-877. And Ms. Perry, please give us a overview of that.
And this is just the rundown of the schedule for the payments and the information on the loan that we just acquired.
And this is a state mandated requirement to simply notice this.
Okay.
So we'll do this again at the 6 o'clock meeting, but there's no action needed. All right, any questions on that item? If not, we'll move on to item 2, public hearing to receive input from citizens on the proposed fiscal year 2025 budget and tax rate of $1.67, no change. Ordinance number 24-1260, second reading. Mr. Granum, is that?
Mayor, I'm going to toss it over to Director of Finance Administration, Perry.
All right. Ms. Perry.
Watch out for them bus wheels there too.
You have to switch hats,
Yeah.
Tracy.
Yeah, Tracy.
I got to go home and get it.
I was going to did you bring that one with you?
This is just our second reading.
She won't come.
Second reading for the budget amendment that we heard on the last meeting. We'll have the actual public hearings. It's advertised this time and not last meeting.
Okay. Any questions on the second reading on the budget? All right. Next item of business, year-end budget amendments, ordinance number 24-1261. And back to Director of Finance Administration, Perry.
This ordinance is basically where we had some equipment that was ordered in a previous fiscal year that came in this fiscal year, so we're having to pay for it and just sorry, I lost my words.
Upcoming.
Appropriate the money.
Appropriate the funding.
We had 2 vehicles in the police department, a truck and a camper in the fire department, and a dump truck in public works.
These are things that were ordered in the previous fiscal year but didn't arrive.
Actually, the police department was ordered in fiscal year 22.
Oh, wow.
The other 2 were 23 and 24. And the rest of it is just accounting for where we pay for things out of the general fund. Solid waste is going to pay general fund back now.
Okay. Reimbursing, solid waste reimbursing general fund.
Or is it?
All right, any questions on the budget amendments? All right, next item is the record ordinance amendment ordinance number 24-1262. Chief Seymour, I know this one has been a long time coming.
Y'all got one. I should have brought me a bottle of water.
I got one for you.
I know you did. That's why I said that.
Trick question.
This is a long story, so stay hydrated.
While he takes a drink, I'll compliment our city manager and I assume facilities director on our new portraits.
Yes, indeed. And also Summer Sheldon. It was a collaboration with Justin, Summer, and I. And if you recall, those are the portraits that were taken when each of you originally were seated. And it's been a project in the works, and Summer and Justin got it done. Thank you very much.
And Kate.
And Kate, yes, and Kate, absolutely. It was a collaboration with the 3 of them.
It looks very professional. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And they're such beautiful people.
I will give a shout out. We stole the look and the idea from Collegedale. If you go into their city hall, in the lobby, they have that. And I thought, well, we don't really have a lobby like they do, and this is a much better place. So it's that look in our commission chambers and courtroom.
Love it. You good and hydrated, Chief?
That took so long. Kind of like CLT this morning. All right. Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So as you see, we're here for the record ordinance. And you may not have known, but we actually have an existing record ordinance. And so tonight's proposal is to basically repeal and replace. We're just going to replace it with a new version instead of cutting and pasting and all that. You may ask the question, what's the purpose of our record ordinance? So just simply stated, the purpose is to provide us regulations when we, the city, have a reason to tow a vehicle, right? And that also is like when an owner or operator of a vehicle doesn't know who to tow, or they're not available, or maybe they've been injured and they can't make that determination. We, the city, have to have a way of being able to do that. And we can't, like the last sentence says, we as a city, being a government entity, can't just choose a company from the phone book and call them. There has to be a fair way, right, to spread that out. So that's really ultimately the reason is this ordinance exists for those situations that arise when the city has a government interest and we need to tow a vehicle. And we have to have those protocols and fair system that is approved to be able to do that. So that's the main reason. A little bit of kind of what is involved in the record ordinance and what it regulates and does is companies that meet qualifications through an application process, right, can be put on a list to help provide those needs to us when they're needed. This list, what it does, it determines a rotation system. So record companies are on this list, just rotate through and those needs are met. So you might hear me say rotation call list or rotation list, and that's what it refers to. These core standards are set by our ordinance. The application process is set by our ordinance, which outlines inspection process and minimum requirements and all that. Yes.
Which we already have one. We have
Yes.
one right now. And you know, and it may surprise you, but I have not read that. I
And read what?
Our
record.
existing record ordinance.
Yeah.
It's been on my reading list.
Well, municipal code is quite thick, and
Yeah.
I can understand you just haven't gotten to that chapter.
Yeah, maybe not. But that's going to be one of my questions. What's the difference?
And that's what we'll get to. Right. I'm just
I'll
trying
let
to
you
establish
see.
the backstory. You may not understand why we're even discussing this or that it even existed, right? And so we have to have a way for police department or codes enforcement to be able to call a record because we need those services, right? So there has to be a fair way to determine that. And so this system is very common through most local governments across Tennessee and even the state. Now, there's other variations and other differences that some agree to, but this is probably the most common one, I would say. This ordinance also, what it does, it includes fees, but it sets maximum fees. It doesn't say what a record company has to charge per se. But it does set those maximums. And what it's doing is just kind of a checks and balances of, hey, if we call them, there is a fee that's comparable and fair that we determined and whatnot. Like I said, record companies can and often do. Sometimes we'll charge less or negotiate with owners and all. So again, it's just kind of that maximum that they're allowed to be able to do that. It does not regulate kind of those private connections. So a homeowner needs their car towed from their lot. It doesn't control if a private business needs a car that towed from their lot. This is not what that does. That's kind of an agreement between that entity or business and the record company or the owner of the vehicle. Kind of becomes more of a civil issue as well. So really, this only pertains to when government, we have an interest in towing those vehicles as well. So why did we look at this? Well, there's several reasons. One is we wanted to look at the record fees. Several years ago, the city of Chattanooga and Hamilton County, through recommendations from area record companies, started looking at their fees. So they had to make adjustments, and it had been years since those adjustments had been made. Well, Red Bank's one of those. We had not. I think the last update that I found was about 2010 in this record ordinance. So we've had the same fees for 10, 15 years. And obviously, things have changed and inflation has happened across the board, except record fees were still stuck at where they were 15 years ago. So we looked at that. So, and there were other sections and all and questions we would get on occasion that we wanted to clarify as well. So we were addressing those issues. How did we do this? Well, we first started off by reviewing our current policy and seeing what needed to change, but we also wanted to get input from the current record drivers, record companies. So we actually set out a meeting, and most everybody that was on our current list of records came out, and we got input from them. We listened and took down notes and all that. Now, not all recommendations did we really agree to or anything, but there was a lot of information that we did take into account to build into this ordinance, mainly a lot of the fees and all. So after we did that, we also reviewed fees and ordinances from other agencies, and you can kind of see that list there. We didn't take one or two. Yes, we kind of have a market here in Hamilton County that we tried to primarily control the fees, what they go by, but we want to see what others did. So we used some other examples there. So we got that information. We started looking at the draft. The city attorney and I went back and forth many times on different drafts, back and forth on verbiage and whatnot. And so finally we came up with what we thought was a workable draft. And so when we kind of decided on that, I actually sent out another, that draft to the record companies as well, kind of to be open, but also to provide, ask for any feedback. One company provided me some feedback, some questions, things that maybe weren't clear. Man, that's a really good point. So we took that information, Mr. Stoltz and I met again, along with the city manager, and went on those changes to where we finally came to our final draft. So yes, we've been working on this for months, and here we are finally. So to answer your question, Mr. Commissioner Phillips, what were the changes? So I'm not going to go through and hit every single word, but I'm going to give you kind of an overview of the majority of the
You're not going to read aloud and then we follow along.
I could.
Well, let's not.
I could read all the whereases, airports, all that. So this first one is probably one of the, other than the fees changing, which I'll get to at the end of this a little bit. The first one, bullet here, is probably one of the more bigger changes. So this, we used to have in the current ordinance, we have a requirement that says that a record company has to own and or operate from a piece of property here in Red Bank. What we found that is really it was forcing record companies who had offices and primary business operations at other locations. It was causing them to have to come in here and find a lot, create some type of office space, hang a sign, do all this, but then really cars aren't stored here and things like that. Now, some are, I'm not saying all of them, but what was happening is we had a couple that would come in and do that, and they were complying by the ordinance, but it was like it was forcing these lots to be in our city that it didn't make sense. We don't have a lot of record companies in Red Bank, and our goal is to have enough records on a list that can meet our need, and that rotate if somebody's not available, we can, go to the next one. If there's only one or two, there might be harder issues for that to be met. Although I'd say we've had really good success with our current records that are on the list. So what we did instead of requiring the business to be in Red Bank, we said, well, what's a good radius around Red Bank that they can have a business but still respond here in a timely manner? So that's what we did. We looked at some of their offices of those that are currently on the list. And so the 4 miles was chosen because of the ones that are on the list and where their primary office is. That would allow them. If I went smaller, that may negate and prevent those that wanted to participate on the list. It would knock them out. And then it may even shrink our pool of potential records that can be on that list.
How many do we have right now in Red Bank
I believe we have 4.
that are on our rotation list?
Yes.
Is that right?
And there's not a maximum or minimum. That's probably about how many, on average, we probably had 3 to 5, you know, with the years that I've been here at least.
Yeah.
Before that, I don't know, but that probably on average, I can think of. Yes, sir.
How many puts it in when we go to 4 Mile?
That I don't know.
Oh, you don't know how many there?
That was one of my questions. What's the potential number?
There would be several that would fall into that 4 Mile if they wanted to apply, sure.
Is it the 4 mile radius from City Hall or the line of Red Bank? in
City
Chattanooga?
limits, from the city limits.
That's pretty big.
Well, there's one business that's 3.5 miles outside of Red Bank. So,
As a crow flies kind of thing.
that is correct.
Right.
But that is still a reasonable amount of time to be here to service the city. You know, now record companies, they manage their own record companies how they want to, right? So a few of them may allow some drivers to take them home, but where's their home? You know, is it further out? Is it not? You know, there's all these variables. Some of them don't allow. They have to go to the shop and get the record and then, you know, come here. So that varies.
How many calls are we making a day or a week? I mean, how often are these guys getting called?
That's a good question. Depends if it's raining or not.
That's fair. A good answer.
I'd say a couple of weeks. It's not a huge amount, you know. Now, if seems like there's a time where there's maybe a lot of rain and there's a lot of crashes, then there might be 3, 4, 5 a week. I don't know. It can just vary from arrests to. I just don't have specific data information for you on that, but maybe able to get it, but I just don't have it.
Yeah, just curious.
No problem. This, one of the reasons too there is with that current ordinance, the way it's written, it's forcing basically car lots. You know, it's forcing somebody to have a lot here in Red Bank, that where cars are stored or wrecked. And yes, we have requirements to put fencing and kind of to be blocked and just, you know, spruce it up and all that, but there's still, you know, car lots. And we didn't think Red Bank maybe wanted to do that or have those in it, not preventing them from being here. Because obviously we have zoning ordinance and all that allows for that, and this still allows for that.
Just not incentivizing
But it's
them.
like, it's just forcing, right? It's just, it's a loophole against our current ordinance. And so that's where we just decided, or I decided that maybe just having this radius out, you know, around, in or around Red Bank and within Hamilton County, that caveat is in there too. So, but anyway.
Well, excuse me. I would think that the fewer, like 4 or 5 in Red Bank, more people get a bigger piece of the pie instead of inviting, I don't know, Commissioner Hayes, Commissioner Wilkinson asked the question about how many, but if you get, I don't know, 15, then everybody's going to get fewer calls down the line, whereas within Red Bank, our businesses would get more calls. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes. But currently, 3 of the 4, well, all 4 have a secondary location in Red Bank. We do not have a primary location. There's one that actually owns land, from what I understand. Years ago, with that ordinance, I think that might have been a requirement at that time. So what it's created is they don't operate, are they really a Red Bank business if they're, you know, and then plus, honestly, I think my responsibilities to the citizens, there's enough to, of this service to allow opportunity enough to serve our community versus, I don't want this to sound bad. I mean, I know businesses are in it to make money, but any record company will tell you if they could not rely on just these rotation calls to stay in business. It's just not enough. But every dollar helps, you know, right? So that's the thing. My intent's not to open this up to, you know, 50, you know, records. But it is allowing, again, I had this as a smaller radius, but I increased it a little bit because of one of our current records. It would have been one, if not maybe two, would have been knocked out of the current list. So that would have shrunk it down to only a couple that would have been able to be on the list.
You have a couple questions,
Okay,
Commissioner Phillips.
well, I didn't see you.
I was just going to ask, I did see correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, that if they want to be on that rotation list, they have to pay the permit fee, right?
Yes, it's a license.
So, and how much is that? That's like $200, and then there was like a $50 inspection fee or something.
There is those,
So,
which
You know.
can actually be waived, which is.
Okay. I'm just thinking that's I wouldn't think that a whole bunch of people would be clamoring to pay that just to be on our rotation list. But,
Well, and that's
I don't
for them
know.
to-
I'm not in the wrecker service industry, so.
And that's something that the business has to decide on themselves, right? Is it, how many tows are they gonna get? Here's my record fee, that I don't have to pay. Is it even worth me being on the list to go through all that to be on the list? And that may call some businesses, I don't know. Right, kind of that free enterprise opportunities, I guess.
All right, well, do the people who have to own a lot here now, do they have to get you got your county business license, you got your city business license. Do they have to get a city business license here, or do they just pay the permit fee and that is their business license for Red Bank? Are you following me?
Yes.
All right, and then, on the radius, are you saying that one of the people that are in here now, that if we decrease that to 3 miles, it would put them out of the one that has their property here now? I don't understand who's getting next.
Right, the way
Yeah.
this current ordinance is, the new proposed written ordinance is there's verbiage in there talking about their primary place of business, where
Okay,
they have office, that they do day-to-day transactions. Now, day-to-day, maybe a normal business would be considered. It doesn't mean necessarily that somebody has to be there for 8 hours a day, every 5 days a week, but they need to be in that facility reasonably, right? What my thought is, we did not want just an empty lot and having somebody circumvent the need of this, right? And so that's what all of them have. What they're in essence having to do is pay this fee for this secondary lot and having that upkeep for that secondary lot in our city just to be on our rotation list. I would think if I was, and I don't know, but I would think if I had a business and I'm paying money to have a lot in Red Bank and I'm paying rent or any electricity, whatever I'm having to do, that, as overhead, if I can cut that overhead, now that I don't have to have that lot and I can just go here and have this lot, then yes, I would want to do that and cut that out, so then they wouldn't have to have a lot here.
well, and on that lot here, do they have to pay their business taxes or their business license taxes, get another location
don't
fee,
think-
or you know what I'm saying?
There's a
Do they got a primary and a secondary?
taxes, and I don't know,
Have a business license to do that. I think it's all the record.
it's just a permit.
Okay, so the permit, that's what was kind of my question. Does the permit cover the business license kind of thing?
Well,
To
plus,
operate here.
the permit fee was $100, and on the proposed fee schedule, I increased it to $200. But.
Do they pay sales tax or business
there's no
tax?
sales tax.
No.
So there's currently, you said 3 or 4 ghost offices, storefront placeholders in Red Bank for record businesses. And all of those, or just 3 of them, have other locations.
Well, all of them have other.
All
locations.
4 have other locations.
None of them use these 4 locations as the primary
Okay,
office locations or anything.
so they have,
Some
they all
may
have,
be more established than others, depending on how the current interpretation is of what an office is and all that in our current ordinance.
so 4 record businesses have secondary locations
Yes.
and are all of those locations zoned commercial?
They are all in a commercial area, what their specific zoning is.
I would expect most likely I can't say definitively, but I would guess that a record company would fall under a C1 commercial type of allowed use. And
There's some that, have contributed to the city because they purchased property,
right,
right?
and they're
So
paying their
they
sales tax,
contributed
they're
to
paying
that, and they're
property
based on
tax.
rules and all
if
that
they
at the
own
time,
it.
And they're paying property tax to,
Mhm.
property tax owners and owners in Red Bank. Then you have others that, haven't done that pay somebody to share a lot or, rent, whatever it is, so.
So, and these record services are not subject to sales tax, so we're not getting any sales tax revenue as a result of them having even secondary locations in our city.
Correct, that's what my understanding is.
So if we were to allow for a wider radius to include their primary locations, it could potentially free up to 4 commercially zoned lots in the city for other businesses, potentially sales tax generating businesses.
It's possible. I can't speculate. I would, in some early conversations, the one that owns property, I think would still obtain and keep that, so they use it for other things as well, not just like our tows or anything. So, but, I'm sure, it's possible.
I don't think that record lots are usually on the list of most requested business types for Red Bank. Not that they're necessarily undesirable, but I think that a lot of people have other businesses in mind that they would put higher on their priority list. And certainly if this would release those owners from having an extra obligation and expense, I'm sure Red Bank isn't high enough demand to be able to find somebody else to pay those property taxes.
Do any of those record services have space to store up to 5 or 6 or 10
Yeah.
cars?
Yes, so when they get property, before they can get a permit, we have to go on site, come inspect and look. And so one of the requirements is that there's room to house at least 10 vehicles,
And that's under the current.
current and proposed.
So there's some pretty good sized lots then that could potentially be on the market in short term if we consider approving this ordinance.
Just,
But they exist and they're businesses in Red Bank that could utilize their purpose of business, i.e. being a
well,
record
it's hard to
service.
speculate what an owner's gonna do with their property if this is passed and these record companies decide they don't have to rent this property anymore, what that owner's gonna do with that property, right? But it potentially could free up those spaces for other businesses to be in there. That's just up to the individual owners, but it'd just be hard for me to speculate what they would
There's
do
a lot
with
of
the property or not.
Properties available that a new business could go in besides what we're speaking. Okay.
Any other questions or Chief, you got more
Oh, I've
to
got
go? Oh, keep going, keep going. Don't let us stop you.
Well, that's okay, because I had a question slide for you. So you can add the questions.
We're jumping the gun.
This- And like I said, this first one is the bulk of it, right? This is the biggest significant change other than the fees to the ordinance. And this is probably one of the more controversial, debatable, because there's different opinions on this. My thought is to have available enough records to service our community. Also, to me, it didn't make sense because it looks like our current ordinance, all it's doing is allowing loopholes. It's allowing these record companies to maybe have property in here that maybe really wasn't the intent of the ordinance at the time. The intent is maybe have businesses in Red Bank that operate here and all that, and there's just none of them do. And so I was trying to kind of alleviate some of that. But and again, like I said, that radius is a little smaller, but I expanded it just so the current ones could stay on there. One thing we did do, some feedback we've gotten is I think our current, ordinance maybe only allowed for 15 minutes, might be 20, I think it's 15. 15 for them to respond to a scene. Well, 15 minutes isn't enough for them to drop what they're doing and get to the scene where we are. So we increased that to 30 minutes, which is probably closer to more standard across the board. So if they get a call in the middle of the night, they've got to get dressed, maybe go to the shop and get the record and then be on our scene within that 30 minutes as well. And so that's just have some allowances there that we don't have officers or whatever sitting there for an hour, hour and a half waiting for a record. Some minor adjustments to some lot.
Well, and then, okay, so you're on call rotation, I call you up, you gotta go get your thing, my cop's sitting out there for 2 hours, what's the penalty, anything? Or is it just don't do that again, or?
Well, anything is up to kind of the discretion of the city manager and the recommendations that it could lead up to, which is built into the ordinance. Like even a suspension of license, like up to 30 days, or even, it could even lead to just termination if it's that serious. But yeah. We don't have like a formal record board, like maybe larger. So a lot of this just falls on the police department, right? Even though it's in the police department, I still have one supervisor that kind of oversees and manages the list and does the inspections and things like that. But there'll be, and we understand sometimes a company might be a few minutes late, right? They get stuck in traffic or whatever. We're not, we cancel them and we start the other one and that delays it.
But if the guy comes up on
the issue, but like I said, we really don't have a problem like that.
Okay.
The ones we work with have been great. So. This next one is just some minor changes to our current lot requirements, some verbiage. I don't think we really had anything about how high a fence needed to be, or even though we say it needed to be a secured lot, we want to say they were locked gates. There's some things in there about metal or whatnot, but what we want to do is prohibit the use of scrap metal as fences, that it's kind of brought up. There may be some material out there that's developed that looks nice and good, that's reasonable, but the current ordinance might have prevented that. So we wanted to kind of limit that. But also, if they have a lot in Red Bank, this would not supersede anything that might be in another ordinance if there was a beautification or some type of property maintenance requirements of, grass cutting or anything like that, that requirements the city had. It could fall in that. As well. It does clarify that a record company can only be listed on the rotation list once. So that kind of came up to where if you have a company maybe, or a company with two different names, could they be on the list twice and get more calls for service or whatnot. So that wasn't the intent of the current one, but we wanted to clarify it in this ordinance. That's one of those clarifications that we wanted to put in there. We added a grace period for renewing their annual permits. Ends December 31st. Oftentimes we don't get renewals until January or so. So technically they would be operating past that expiration date. So we wanted to get a little bit of a grace period in there to allow them to apply and all that past that expiration. We did add something. So even though my recommendation on a fee for permits increased, I did add in here that we also charged a fee of $50 for each record that they get inspected here. So what we want to do, to me, it did not make sense. It's like, look, if THP or Chattanooga has stickered this vehicle and it's gone through an inspection process, we don't have any more restrictive standards there. And to me, look, once they've checked out and said that your record is okay, then as long as you provide proof that that record was inspected, then the city manager would have the discretion to waive that $50 inspection fee. It also keeps my supervisor from having to go out here every time that a new record comes in, or every year on these annual. And one company might bring 3 or 4 records here, and that's time that they're having to do, which is kind of the purpose of the money. But again, I figured if it's already been approved by, vetted by what we would consider an appropriate other agency that we know has those standards.
These are annual inspections?
They are.
Okay. So they have to provide proof of an annual inspection
Right,
to whom?
to the police department.
Okay,
Well, it would be with their application.
okay,
So the application and the renewal and the permit starts off at City Hall and the city manager's office. But then it comes over to the police department for us to look or to approve the permit or site location or whatever. And if we've already looked at the site location, we know most of them anyway. It's, supervisor might run by there real quick and take a look, make sure nothing's really changed and it's still in compliance.
I did read in the language that it was the city manager or designee. It's not the city manager that inspects the record.
That's correct.
Okay,
No.
okay, just clarifying
The
that.
designee is the police department, I've designated it too.
Several sub-designees involved.
The current ordinance talked about towing locations. So currently it said that somebody that's on our list must tow a vehicle anywhere that that the owner or driver wanted them to be towed. But if it's past their lot, if it's further out than where they would normally take it to, then the record company could charge a fee, right? What was brought to my attention, it's like some of the record companies can't or can't take it out, further out or across the state, or they might not be able to then, whatnot. So we wanted to allow that and just kind of limit, within Hamilton County, kind of within reason. But then also if it's further than their lot, we also wanted to say, yes, but the record company can also require payment or have to do some negotiation if it's further. Instead of just saying you must, and it doesn't matter whether you get paid or not, we thought that was kind of unfair for the records, right? And so they written into the ordinance now, even though they probably were practicing it beforehand, it's just at least written in here that, the record companies can come to an arrangement or payment arrangement before they take that car to another location or outside of Red Bank. It also, so kind of a minor thing, but if we had a list that only had one or two, or maybe there was a major storm that came in and no records that were on our list were available. So it just changes some verbiage. We really kind of had it in there anyway. But the next change, basically what it does is if our list is exhausted and we still need a record, then the ordinance gives an officer the authority, permission to kind of temporarily use somebody else's list, another record company that maybe is on somebody else's list, that might be further out. If none of our records are available, we'll use our list. And it's only when those have been exhausted and nobody is available, or let's say that record company or no record companies have that equipment. So, if we needed a very large size record, but we really didn't have anybody on the list or they weren't available, then we could call another reputable record that was on another law enforcement agency's list.
We got a question
See, that
from,
makes me think about the different classifications of records. I learned a lot reading this ordinance, but the A and D is the typical car tow. And then B and C are larger. So if you need a B and C, you've got to go somewhere else because it's a
Correct.
larger.
From what I understand, the 4 record companies that are on our list only have the A's and B's.
Okay.
And so they could not provide like a Class C record. And we really don't have a lot of need for those, right?
Okay.
And if we do, like on Gad Road, that's City of Chattanooga. So, but it doesn't mean that we won't or can't. And so this allows for those few times we might need one to be able to do that. Because a large record may not want to pay a permit fee of $200 to come by here and get inspected when they're called once every 2 years. Right? To them, it's not, but we need to have an ability to be able to have a record that size if we need it. So, one other change we did was allows records to stay in place on a rotation list if they're called for like a tow for an abandoned vehicle. So often if a car is illegally parked or abandoned and it's not a time sensitive call, what this allows a lot of times there's a lot more headaches on an abandoned vehicle for a record company, right? They tow a vehicle, they really end up basically losing money. Because a lot of times they might not be able to find the owners of the vehicles, they have to put a mechanic's lien, and they don't really get the money out of it that they have into it. So what this does, it allows a company, if Joe's Record Service is on the top and they get a call, have got an abandoned car, can you see about coming and getting it? And they come and get it, they can still stay on the list to, for their next wreck or other rotation record that we might need. From what I gather, this is pretty common in our area for Chattanooga, and I think Hamilton County maybe to do as well. So it prevents a lot of times. Sometimes we would have maybe where somebody may have turned down a tow when we needed them because of that, and so because they didn't want to lose their spot for a tow that they would be able to make money on. Right? So that I think helps them, the ones that are on the list. And then also just a minor change to go with, to be more modernized. We changed some of the verbiage that allows, yes, you can text somebody an invoice. You can do it digitally if you want to, email or whatever. It doesn't have to be rented. It's just the same information has to be on those documents and available. So those are those. And so really, just getting into this last slide here real quick. So the other one is the fees we also updated. So we took Chattanooga's and Hamilton County's fees. I looked at other cities as well. And so we realigned those fees as well. Now what we're going to do is on the second reading, there will be a resolution on there to approve the new fee schedule. We're not putting it in part of this. We have to approve the ordinance and then we'll approve the fee schedule, the second document. One of the things we did is that says is we're taking these fees out of the ordinance. And so that we just can pass the new or revised fees. It makes it easier, right? Just by resolution instead of having to vote on something twice and changing a codified ordinance, and which takes a lot more, obviously, to do that. So. And then it allows from time to time review of those fees and consideration, and do we need to increase them from time to time? It makes that process much easier.
Or lower them,
Or what?
or lower.
Or lower. Well,
I know, I don't see that ever coming up.
so that's primarily kind of the changes and the information that I have for you. So now I'll open it up for any questions for 2 minutes.
Any more questions? We must have gotten them all out earlier.
Yeah, the radius deal still requires somebody to have property in here. My thought was it's just forcing businesses to be here that aren't really here and to have lots. And even a lot of them don't store vehicles that they tow. They take them to their other lots. And then you have one, some of them are just so close, just outside of our city limits. Why they got 2 lots within a mile of each other? Doesn't make a lot of sense. So, but again, there's differences of opinion on this, and this is the biggest part of the discussions that we had with this. So, and I listened to it because I looked at the radius. I had considered 5 miles at one time. I looked at 7 miles even, but I reduced it down to less than what we have now. But then I realized that would have knocked out 1, possibly 2 records that are currently on our list, but now I have 4 anyway. So, yeah.
Typically, we're compared to other municipalities, and I understand East Ridge has their own selection of in-city record services,
Yes.
and so does Soddy Daisy. Now, Signal Mountain is unique in that they haven't and won't. It's just their place. But outside of Signal Mountain, record service goes up there. We can call. So has East Ridge or Soddy Daisy considered going beyond their city limits? Don't know. It's just us.
So Soddy Daisy has a land area of, I think, like 27 square miles.
Much
and,
more.
And
Yeah.
East Ridge, I think, is at least 13. So those cities are, 2-4 times the size geographically of ours. And so we don't have as much space within our 6.4 square miles to store 10 or more cars at a time as those cities do if they are opting to stay within their city limits.
Well, like Chattanooga, they don't have, they actually divide into districts. So you have to be either in that district or close proximity. I'm not sure exactly what that's. THP, they don't, just because you're in this part of the state that you can tow anywhere in that state, right? They go through approval process, although they do it differently than we do. But they still have it broken down by districts and areas.
Even with the county, are some of those in Red Bank on the Hamilton County list?
Yes.
Okay,
Like you'll have a record company that might be on different
okay.
lists.
Districts.
I had considered about just trying to use somebody else's list, but it's their list. So it's like forcing our, list on and using another agency's list. And I don't know if that was right, to be able to do that. So my mind should be back on that. Sorry, Aaron.
No, it's good. We have reached the time for citizen comments for items on this work session agenda. I appreciate Chief all the time and effort I know you've poured into this, and our city attorney, Mr. Stoltz. I first heard about you guys working on this, a year ago or?
Probably, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I know there's a lot that went into that, and I appreciate all the detail and feedback you got from local businesses too. So now's the time for citizen comments for items on this work session agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less and state your 2 minutes or less, for work session, and state your name and your address for the record. I'll go ahead and invite anybody up to the podium if you have anything you'd like to say about the items on this agenda.
Hello, I'm Kenny Burke, with County Director of Service, 121 Maryland Avenue. This order's been in place for probably 20 years. Mr. Stoltz wrote it. It had a primary list. If you was in Red Bank, you'd be on the primary list. The requirements was to be the primary. So the city said for many years that I've had a primary place here. The other three guys had one third city coach. Rusty, the lieutenant, sergeant, that done it. So we've all been here and we've owned this list, but now you want to open it, change the ordinance for some reason, for us to select one or two people to add to this list. I don't understand that. I guess, again, we're here, we have a business, I have a business license. I do have a business license. And the permit, the I-6 truck, so it cost me, I got to pay $50 for each truck last year. So I spent a lot of money. I own the property. Arnold Stoltz wrote the ordinance. Did you serve for this one?
I'm sure I did.
Yes,
sir.
And it was that you had to protect one record service in Red Bank at that time. So you wrote the ordinance where he would be the primary, and you could be on the secondary list where it reads right now, the way I read it. If I wasn't available, one of the other three guys wasn't available, you could go on the primary, secondary list, and you could be called off. So I don't know why that we want to accommodate one person. He says, what's 3 miles? So we need 4 miles to accommodate one guy. I spent a lot of money at my place over the years, paid a lot of taxes, And the ordinance right now on my school will change it to have a primary list for people that own business in Red Bank. Put them outside. See the Chattanooga, if you're not in that zone, you cannot be on. I can't be in Hickson. I have to be in the North Chattanooga zone. So there are zones you have to meet. I just think we need to sit down and really look at this. So this is what was written, I think 2000, we had to be here. Now you're changing it again, maybe to accommodate somebody that's 3.5 miles out. Why is that?
That's your timer, sir. Did you say your name was Mr. Bart?
Burke, are you right, Paige?
Burke,
Yeah.
Mr. Burke. Thank you for coming, Mr. Burke. We appreciate your time. Okay. Any other, please, Chief?
So I want to clarify that I did not change the reason of this ordinance to allow for another record company or two to come in on this list. All right. My intent was to look at this ordinance to look at, is there a better way of doing this, right? We're asking these companies to have, I say basically a fake business. I mean, they establish it, they meet the minimum and get the record permit, but they don't have operations there. They pay somebody $50 a month for a year, whatever their agreement is, so that they can hang their name on a fence and they don't operate here, right? So, with that, my distance, and I'm not changing this ordinance in the attempt to allow a bay or a record company that I know of or anything like that to be on this list. I have no idea who's in that radius. I do know when I looked at this and I was looking at the radiuses and the way we wrote it, I wanted to make sure that it did not kick out anybody that is currently on the list to be unfair to them. Now, I would say, I first had it at 3 miles. So, it's okay with me is if we change that to 3 miles, but then also grandfather in anybody that's currently on the list. I think 3 miles would be adequate, but the reason when I looked at that again was to change to make sure that it didn't kick out anybody on the current list as well. So, that could be an option. I threw that out there.
Will the secondary list go away though? As Mr.
Well,
Berger
right,
was saying?
currently, under that operation, we don't have anybody on a secondary list. We don't have anybody interested to be on a second list. We've never had anybody apply in my tenure here to be on a secondary list, so it's always been.
So they'd have to pay the permit and all that stuff to be on the secondary list if they were not in Red Bank as currently done, right?
I'd have to look at the ordinance to see if they actually a secondary has to pay a permit, but there's a secondary list, or if they have to go to the actual.
But there's nobody on it?
But we do not, there's nobody on a secondary list. But anyway, I just want to clarify, that's why I was trying to honestly have meetings with the record companies and get feedback and all that, so. And I get it, you're in business, you want to make money, but, again, to me, it's forcing us to have empty lots sitting around for no reason.
Yes, ma'am.
Chief, do you happen to recall the zones, for instance, that you were talking about that Chattanooga has set, what the boundaries are for those? If it's within 1 mile, 2, 3 mile radius of a certain point
5,
in that
10.
I
district?
don't know, they may be more geographically defined, instead of a radius. But I don't, I have to look at that and see.
And we can't control what they do. Let's say that they're in, well, we'll take Kane's record. He's up there on the things. If all of our lock gates and all of that stuff, that's all gone because he's in a different thing. We have no say so in that, do we?
No, so for them, we do have to say so in that to be on our list, you have these minimum specifications.
Okay.
You have to have your business, you still have to have a secure facility that's gated and all that. And we can just say, well, you don't have a locked gate, so we can't put you on our list. Now, as far as like other ordinances, we could not enforce like property maintenance.
Sure.
Outside of our city.
But if it was, if it was not AAA record, if it was BB record, and he was locking them up in a mobile home park somewhere and just leaving them out, you could say, no, you can't be on our list.
Correct.
Okay, because you don't meet our criteria.
That's correct.
Okay, just making sure.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna return to citizen comments if that's all right.
Cool. Yes.
Are there any other citizen comments for any items on this work session agenda?
Something from the case 2618 Berkeley. I just wanted any information on like lot fees. After a certain amount of time, there's a certain amount of lot fees allowed, or is that in this ordinance, or is there another ordinance within the city?
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. Chief Seymour, do you have an answer at this moment? If not, that's
I don't.
okay.
Clarification.
No, unless like in Mr.
Mr. McCabe, are you asking about what people get charged to pick up their vehicles?
Yes, and then after what time? I mean, you got a certain amount of time, no lot fee, and all of a sudden after 30 days, it's a certain amount each day.
Is that specified within the fee structure, what the wreckers are allowed to charge to
It is.
the owners of the vehicles?
Yeah, and I didn't get into the fee schedule, but basically it allows business hours of like 8 to 5, right? So somebody can pick up their vehicle during those times, and then there's certain charges or storage costs that are in there, which is also currently in our current ordinance, right? We just pulled it out. But then there's also, if somebody needs to get their vehicle outside of those hours, if it's an emergency, then there's parameters in there that if the company can do that, then they can charge more for leaving home on a weekend or at 2 a.m. If you have, hey, I need my medicine out of my bag, has allowance for that, but they also can charge you for that because they're at home, and having to come in.
So those rates, I'm sure, are market rates comparable to, like you said, the other ordinances for adjoining jurisdictions that you compared.
Yes, and some do it differently, like when we get into like winching costs, some of them charge by the hour, some by the half hour, and how many records are involved, and we can really get into the weeds on some of this, and so, we looked at some of that. Storage fees seem to be pretty standard, and Dolly's and Aldi's, so just some standard things, some what they call, there's some fees that are being charged that our current ordinance does not allow. And other ordinances allow for other additional fees for record companies to recruit some of those. So like if they have an abandoned vehicle or they need to send notice, they have to go, they pay money for software and for these other things. And sometimes they'll have an insurance adjuster come out one day and then the next day, so they're having to take time to meet with them. So these fees allow them to recoup a lot of those costs. Plus there's disposable fees, right? You're dealing with gas and oil. We have to clean that up, and then also to properly dispose of it, they have to pay for it. So that way they're allowed some fees and to be able to recoup some of those costs as well. Sure.
Thank you, Chief. Any other comments from any citizens for items on this work session agenda? All right, if not, then any other business to discuss by the commission? All right, then we'll have a few minutes to adjourn until our 6 o'clock meeting. Maybe needs a restroom break to make a run for it. Thank you, everyone.